Aloha, inspired moneymakers. Welcome back to Inspired Money, the live stream podcast where we invite a panel of experts to help empower us to make more, give more, and live more. Today, we have a really fun episode Vineyard Chronicles, exploring wine regions and investment opportunities. Whether you're drinking wine, investing, or maybe a little bit of both, life should not be all work and no play. A couple months ago, I was invited to play music at a special dinner by Chef Kealoha Domingo, visiting from Hawaii, and Chef Chung Chow of Narita in New York City. If you've been watching this Inspired Money live stream series from the start, I think it was episode 2, featured sommelier and co-owner of Narita, Jin An. The tasting menu that night was delicious. Chef Kealoha brought ingredients from Hawaii. He pounded fresh poi. I think they served 3 different types of taro that night. It was so delicious. At the end of the night, after all the guests had left, I was invited to hang out with the chefs, including Chef Tony Liu of the Queensboro and Chef Kini Kahaolopua of the prestigious 5-star St. Regis Hotel. They have this, they joke that it was like the Hawaii-New York connection. But that night really reminded me that food and drink definitely taste better when shared with people who are passionate about it. So whether it's food, drink, or music, these are things that connect us. They bring us comfort, and together, they're really a way to elevate and enjoy life. So it's in this spirit that I look forward to spending the next hour with you. Before we bring on our guests, I want to invite you to do a 3-minute plan that it helps to calculate your max retirement income. When I work with a client to build a financial plan, we seek to answer 3 questions. Where are you on your roadmap? How can we optimize your strategy? And how can your investments be improved upon? Of course, doing a 3-minute plan is not comprehensive, but it's a great way to get started in thinking about your future. Oftentimes, getting started is the hardest part, but often the most important part. So go to inspiredmoney.fm/getplan. Tell me how you make out. I can tell you that a little bit of planning goes a long way, and the earlier you start, the better. Again, go to inspiredmoney.fm/getplan. Now, let's welcome in our passionate panel of wine experts. Let me start with Anthony Zhang. He's a serial entrepreneur known for scaling businesses and securing funding from top investors. He's co-founder and CEO of Vinovest, the world's first platform for investing in fine wine. As a mentor at Wine Unify and former head of marketing and business development at Blockfolio, Anthony's influence spans beyond his entrepreneurial endeavors, earning him accolades like the Teal Fellowship Award and recognition on the Los Angeles Business Journal's 20 in their 20s list. Hey, Anthony, welcome. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you as well, Andy. Thanks for having me on.
And I want to point everyone to episode 190. I had Anthony on the podcast 3 years ago, and you can hear about how he pitched Mark Cuban and Mark Burnett when he was still a college student. He talks about his spinal cord injury that left him paralyzed and why he founded Vinovest. We may cover some of that tonight, but for more, you can go to inspiredmoney.fm/190. We also have John Jackson. He's a full-time intellectual property attorney and a passionate sommelier known on YouTube and Instagram as Attorney Somm. He has obtained the prestigious Level 4 diploma from the Wine and Spirits Education Trust and a Wines of Georgia certification. In addition to his formal wine education, John's visited more than 300 wineries in over 65 different wine regions worldwide. John, so glad that you're here.
Thanks very much for having me on. Excited to be here.
Looking forward to it. We also have Tanisha Townsend, Chief Wine Officer of lifestyle agency Girl Meets Glass, where she curates immersive wine experiences in Paris and beyond. She fosters a vibrant community of enophiles with certifications from Wine and Spirits Education Trust Level 3 Advanced to French Wine Scholar. Tanisha empowers wine enthusiasts with knowledge and confidence, ensuring each tasting is a memorable journey of discovery. Tanisha, thank you for staying up late in Paris.
Thank you so much for having me. No problem.
And rounding out our panel for this evening, we have Cha McCoy. She's a certified sommelier with the Court of Masters Sommeliers and Wine and Spirits Education Trust Level 3 candidate. She also holds an executive certificate in wine management. She's a public speaker, beverage event producer. She owns the Communion Boutique Wine and Spirits Shop in upstate New York, where she is broadcasting from this evening, and she leads Cha Squared Consulting. As Charleston Wine and Food Festival's beverage director and Cherry Bomb Magazine's first beverage director and editor, Cha champions change in the beverage community. Thank you, Cha. So glad that you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I look forward to talking wine with this incredible group this evening. Let's go straight into segment 1.
Exploring the profound impact of terroir on wine valuation, we find that the unique environmental factors such as soil composition, climate, and vineyard topography play critical roles. Soil affects grape quality by influencing water drainage and nutrient availability, which in turn shapes the wine's flavor profile. Climate controls the ripening process, affecting essential characteristics like acidity and sweetness. The topography of a vineyard, including the slope and sun exposure, modifies the microclimate, which is crucial for achieving the optimal balance of grape sugars and acids. These elements of terroir not only contribute to the complexity and uniqueness of a wine, but also enhance its market value and investment appeal. Wines from regions known for distinctive terroir characteristics often command higher prices in the market. This understanding aids investors and enthusiasts in making informed choices, recognizing that such grapes offer not just unique tastes, but also potential for significant returns.
So I've heard it said among collectors, sommeliers, and winemakers that what makes wine special is not the alcohol, but it's the terroir. So I want to pose the question to each of you. What is it that makes wine so special? Tanisha, you want to kick us off?
Okay, I'll start us off. What makes wine so special? Starting with the terroir, I'll speak specifically to France since that's where I am. It is so different from place to place, definitely from region to region, but take Burgundy for example. You could have a vineyard in one side and then maybe just across the street from that vineyard, that terroir is going to be completely different. The soil is going to be different, the exposure to sun, the amount of rainfall. So with that kind of difference and that close proximity, that's something that makes it super special. Also just certain things growing in certain places. It's not like everything can grow everywhere. You have certain grapes that grow in Burgundy versus the grapes that grow in Bordeaux versus what grows in Champagne versus what grows in the Loire Valley. And that's something else that makes the wine extra special.
So if we continue with ladies first, Cha, what makes wine so special?
I think just what Tanisha shared, plus if you think about terroir from that, I think the step up will be then the vintage, correct? So let's say an 08 Champagne, which is one of my favorite vintages, and I think many others, they didn't have the same response in 2010, correct? So if you know and understand this, the climate gives us information about a specific time and place. So what Tanisha talked about was the place, and I'm sure I'm gonna leave room here for, of course, Vinovest to jump in to talk about how the value now change as well when we talk about a particular vintage, right? So we know that each year is going to be different. It's not going to be the same amount of rain each year or the same amount of perfect sun. And then the vintage itself becomes an investment. It's the same wine from the same producer, maybe even from the same place, but then now the time actually adds an effect of now a price being driven up or even being diminished. So now I feel like I'm going to just tag it on to Anthony, kind of jump in there and talk about vintages.
Yeah, go for it, Anthony.
I think, place, climate, time, all that is super important. I think, leaving even kind of the last remaining part is looking at how do differences in terroir lead to differences in taste, in price, right, in perceived value. And most wine regions deal with an appellation system, similar to how we, have zip codes in the United States, right? Why does a Beverly Hills zip code just mean that the home is a lot more expensive than an LA zip code, even if the homes are touching each other, right? And you see the same phenomenon in many vineyards, especially in France, right? A Grand Cru vineyard in Burgundy, even if it's bordering a Premier Cru vineyard, and they are literally a stone's throw away from each other. And the terroir actually might be very, very similar, even the same, right? They're going to lead to drastically different prices and perceived value when they are bottled and produced and eventually enjoyed.
John, I want to hear from you because of your extensive travels.
Sure, of course. I certainly agree with the comments so far, but I would add there are some decisions made both in the vineyard and also in the winery by the winemaker that also have a tremendous impact on the wines as well. For example, in the vineyard, they can make decisions about whether or not to use sustainable practices, which I think we may talk about later, and make other decisions that will have a direct impact on the resulting wine. Similarly, the winemaking approach will also have an influence on the wine. And one of the things that I find makes the whole experience of enjoying wine special is also the history and enjoying older wines, such as from birth year vintages or just wines from 10 or 15, 20 years ago or even more. And then when you're enjoying it with your friends, just sitting around and even thinking about what was taking place in the world back at that time during that vintage. So I always enjoy that exercise as well.
So that's really thinking about the stories associated with that time period of the wine.
It is very much so.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this one before we move on?
I'm there with John. Love thinking about the stories, people who made the wine, what the world was like back then, right? It's part of the joy of drinking wine.
Well, I do love this idea of, I think the people you spend your time with drinking a bottle of wine, that does make an impact, and as well as reflecting on time periods, places, and all of that.
Very much so. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy it so much. We usually have a tasting group that gets together, and oftentimes we'll even save our best bottles so that we can enjoy them together and discuss them rather than just drinking them at home with one or two people.
Tanisha and Cha, since you both do events and curate wines, any comments on terroir and how it's influencing consumer preferences?
Cha, you want to go ahead?
Oh, yes. I mean, I feel like for me, it definitely is everything that I think what we're all saying, I guess I just wanted to add is how does price being driven up or how demand is being driven up? And terroir, back to your question, usually plays a role in how it influenced the pricing structure and if there's even a high demand for it or even like scarcity. So that can be the market is driven on is terroir, back to your question, is terroir influencing the investment value, not so much kind of how we enjoy it in experiences or with each other. I think that we don't, let's just say the folks that I am working with, it's driven very little by kind of who made the wine and less, I guess, when I say that, I mean big brands, or is this a collectible? And, what was the terroir like? It's more driven by what's their palate. What are we eating? I love the episode that you had where we talked about the Hawaiian cuisine and kind of pairing it with German wines. Now we get to kind of forget all of the, if you want to say the textbook information, and really just kind of use your palate, which is what we're trained to do, and be able to put the two and two together. Now, there is some information, what goes together, that always helps and that can inform that. And when I'm giving experiences, whether we're traveling somewhere or if we're hosting a dinner party, that's always something I want to talk about. But then sometimes I like throwing out the rule book and really having fun And one of my top selling wines right now is a sparkling rosé from Brazil. So most people don't know or have much interaction with terroir from Brazil. So usually doing something unexpected, like how John mentioned about just enjoying good wine with each other, ends up coming into play. Not like, oh, do you have any champagne from, like, that kind of get lost and like, let's just enjoy ourselves. Does this go well with my dish? More than the producer being the name or the brand, like carrying the conversation. So and I guess I'm trying to beat around a bush by saying depends on who the crowd is. Is it other wine professionals that I'm drinking with, or is it the consumer, the average consumer who just want to have a great time? And so I think there's different types of wine that I would pour for different type of experience level. If someone's a rookie wine drinker or someone who is more knowledgeable about different terroirs in different regions. So I hope that answers the question, but I think it's not all one answer for that for me. Tanisha?
Agree with everything you said, as per usual. But speaking specifically about terroir and the people that I deal with, whether it is a rookie wine drinker or someone who is like a wine lover, but it's like, I don't really experiment that much or know that much about it. What they really want to know is how terroir affects the wine. Like, what does one have to do with the other, and also how it affects the pricing. Why does wine from this place cost a different price than another wine from a place that doesn't seem like it's that far away? So why does a vine and wine from a region that grows in sand versus chalk versus schist, why do these all taste different? What is the difference? How does this lend a flavor profile, lend a different pricing structure to the wine? So that is a question that I get asked a lot. And that's after what grape goes with what region. So,
well, thank you for that. I will just state for the record that I am the amateur in this group. I am the beginner. Not only in this group, but everywhere. I am the beginner when it comes to drinking wine. Let's go to segment 2.
Sustainable viticulture is revolutionizing the wine industry by combining environmental stewardship with financial gain. This approach involves adopting farming practices that emphasize ecological balance, such as reducing chemical inputs, conserving water, and enhancing biodiversity. These practices not only preserve natural resources, but also improve the overall health of the vineyard. Economically, vineyards that pursue sustainability are increasingly attractive to consumers who value environmental responsibility. This shift has led to a market where sustainably produced wines can command higher prices, reflecting the consumer willingness to pay more for products that are kind to the earth. The environmental benefits of sustainable viticulture include lower carbon emissions, reduced water usage, and minimal chemical runoff, making it an essential practice for the future of winemaking. With both financial incentives and ecological benefits, sustainable viticulture offers a compelling model for vineyards aiming to thrive in a competitive market while contributing positively to the planet.
So the wine industry has 8,000-year history of adapting to change. What can the wine industry teach us about sustainability? John?
I think there definitely is a big trend towards sustainability and using organic farming practices. It's something that some producers have been doing for a long time. It's certainly easier in some wine regions than others. For example, in southern Rhone, in the south of France, the weather conditions are typically quite dry during the growing season, and they don't have a lot of rain. But in places to the north of France, Champagne and even Bordeaux, we have the 2023 vintage, and that vintage is currently in the Bordeaux futures process right now. And we hear that there's been a lot of problems with mildew, and a lot of the producers were struggling with mildew then. And so when you have those sorts of challenges, it's more difficult to stay truthful to organic practices. But I know a lot of producers are still doing that and doing the best they can to take an organic approach despite those challenges, because it is something that's extremely important, both in terms of doing what's right for the environment and also producing a high quality wine that the consumers will appreciate and be receptive to.
Cha, do you see trends observed in consumer demand for wines from sustainable vineyards?
Yes. Like I mentioned, I'm between New York City and upstate New York. And one of the key reasons is to actually decrease the footprint for us to get local wines as well. So a good portion of our wines our sauce and spirits come from the Finger Lakes wine region. And we're about an hour away, whether that's me driving to pick up wines like I did this weekend, or just even the logistics of bringing it, getting it here and then having consumers to be able to consume. So the work of just decreasing our footprint when it comes to procuring wine and spirits, and then same when the consumers come in, they're asking, usually when in the upstate area, sometimes their first introduction to wines from upstate New York may be our shop. And it may be a novelty if someone's visiting. Like I heard there's a wine making region nearby and they want to try it out. But there's an opportunity for us to start the conversation from basically just shopping local and being able to support in our local winemakers. My most recent trip to Italy was in Veneto, and we talked about the same thing in Germany about what they consider peewee wines, or also known in the States as hybrid grapes. So that's part of the larger conversation I'm having in my world as a consultant on how do we have the branding and marketing for grapes that folks don't, is unusual. It's a hybrid between two grapes they've never heard of or one they've heard of, just to give them, let's say a shot. Most people wouldn't normally probably even purchase those wines. They only know the typical large international grapes. But I've been on panels. Tech Somm is one of them, where we had a big discussion on how do we actually make these wines and these grape varietals more viable, part of our sommelier work, whether it's creating wine lists wrapped around them, doing more events to give them exposure, or in this case with retail to market them appropriately. So I think there's still some work to be done. There are some conferences that are now being developed to have conversation wrapped around this as well. And I think that is the future for sustainable wineries. And of course, labor practices is part of that discussion as well. But we're trying to see what's going to be a viability for grapes with climate change in different regions. And so I'm happy to be a part of that conversation today.
How about Tanisha? Do you see lessons about sustainability from the wine industry, or things that your clients, signs of demand where they want to purchase wines from sustainable vineyards?
They do want to purchase wines from sustainable vineyards. They are looking for natural wines, things organic, things like that. But I do want to put on blast just a little bit the wine industry and the fact that it isn't quite clear when it comes to labeling what is what. So a lot of people have questions about what is sustainability. And then also when they go to a wine shop, or if they're in their grocery store or something like that, looking for wine, what can they look for? How will they know that this vineyard, this winery uses sustainable practices? So people often ask, what is the labeling like? What are some key things that they can look for? What is some verbiage they can use to ask for these kind of wines? And then also, what do they look for when they are thinking sustainability? Is it sustainable practices in the vineyard? Is it organic? Is it biodynamic? Is it vegan? Like what exactly it is that they're looking for? And then I can direct them to the right place.
And a quick shout out to Gabriella, who's tuning in live. Thank you for applauding John and for the emojis. I want to ask Anthony, in what ways do you see sustainable viticulture practices impacting wine valuation on Vinovest's platform?
Yeah, before I dive into that, Tanisha, don't get me started on the whole natural wine movement. I know what you're saying in terms of putting some of the CMOs of these companies on blast for, frankly, what I think is pretty irresponsible marketing.
Oh yeah, let's go there first.
Oh, shit. Okay. I think it's because of the vagueness of the definition, right? We all want to do better for ourselves and the planet and others. And I think natural wine bars, especially where I live in LA, are extremely popular. But if you ask people what it means to drink a natural wine, 99% of them are going to tell you it means it has no sulfites, right? I think non-natural wine has a connotation of having sulfites, headaches, whereas natural wine, still has natural sulfites. They're just not added sulfites. Sulfites are a natural part of the fermentation process. And I think because of that sort of vagueness around what that means, there's a lot of brands taking advantage of the term natural or sustainable, which don't have any regulations on it, versus more stringent standards like vegan or organic or biodynamic. Right? There's a spectrum there when it comes to what we call sustainable or natural wine. And I think Tanisha also mentioned, are you talking about the wine making process or the wine growing process or the labor practices, right? There's a lot of different definitions and layers to sustainable wine practices in our industry. But at least from the consumer standpoint, I think there's a lot of deception.
I'm kind of curious about the sulfites because I'm told that the amount of sulfites makes a difference for somebody who gets red-faced Asian flush like I do.
Yeah, I'm lucky to not have that gene that half of us Asians get. But I don't think that has anything to do with the actual sulfites. It's more of a reaction to the alcohol that you have.
So, and I would say, Andy, that raw wine has a definition on what, and raw wine is a conference/wine fair. Maybe I should say lean with that first because it started out as a wine fair developed by a master of wine who goes around and basically feature natural wines, but they've created a definition by this MW who has it in a book, kind of like this is what their standard is. So I think that if people are going to say it's natural and it's because they're adhering to the definition of or by raw wine, I think that gives everybody kind of like a baseline, right? And then that helps us in retail. It helps wine directors when they're, we are abiding by the raw wine definition. And so that's usually who I usually tend to when I look to how to describe natural wine, or in this case, raw wine. And then just to add another monkey in the wrench here, it's like, how do we actually think about the visibility? Some people look at it as like, oh, it's only natural if it's unfiltered. And that's even worse because looking at it and is visibly look natural, what people think is natural, then there's winemakers who actually are following what some would call natural wine practices, organic or biodynamic or sustainable. And yet they may be filtering their wines. So they came up with other ways to filter their wines that's not using egg whites or anything else. So it still checks the boxes. However, it's not visible. It's still clear versus being, I call it the lava lamp effect in the bottle, where you see all of the moving cloudiness, haziness, or even looks like let's say a hazy IPA in a glass. If you have an orange wine specifically. So I would say consumers in my shop usually are looking at the bottle and assuming it's natural based on color and if it's unfiltered. And I think that I'm sure a lot of people think that's like the basic standard for if they was picking a natural wine as well, which is clearly doesn't say anything about the practices. So,
John, what are your thoughts?
I agree with the comments so far. The other thing I'll add, in an area that's becoming a big battleground as well, is the weight of the bottle that's used for the wine. I know that's becoming a big battleground for a lot of people concerned about the environment, and a lot of producers are now starting to reduce their bottle weight, and that has a big reduction on the carbon footprint for the winery. For example, I know of one Bordeaux producer that reduced their bottle weight by 40% starting with the 2023 vintage, and just that from the production process alone saved 30 tons of carbon, and that doesn't even count all the savings once it starts being shipped and so forth. So that's becoming more important with consumers as well.
Interesting. We're really getting some inside baseball. Anybody else? Okay, with no more to add, let's go to segment. Are we on 2 or 3? The next segment.
Navigating the wine investment market, requires understanding current trends and identifying emerging opportunities. The global wine market is influenced by shifts in consumer preferences, including a rise in demand for low alcohol and no alcohol wines, driven by health consciousness, particularly in the US. Furthermore, the growth of e-commerce has transformed how wine is bought and sold, although this trend has moderated post-pandemic. Emerging markets, especially in Asia, with China leading in luxury and premium wine consumption, present significant growth opportunities. Wine investment funds play a crucial role here, enabling investors to engage with the wine market through expertly managed portfolios without needing extensive knowledge of wine selection or storage. Technological advancements are also pivotal. Digital platforms enhance market analysis and investment decisions, while blockchain technology improves the authentication of wine provenance and transaction security. Together, these elements offer a comprehensive picture for investors looking to capitalize on the dynamic wine market.
So, Anthony, you saw Vinovest there in that segment. And it's also funny that I learned that I cannot count up to 3. I'll work on that. Anthony, can you talk about how technological advancements are really transforming the wine investment market?
Absolutely, Andy. I am a relative newcomer to the wine investment space. I started collecting and investing in wine only about 10 years ago. And this is something that has been done since our founding fathers, right? Thomas Jefferson was famously a wine collector and investor, and some of his bottles from his personal cellar were the subject of a very famous book, Billionaire's Vinegar, which is an amazing book. That was one of the ones that actually got me into wine. But when I first started collecting wine, there was not a lot of tech-enabled companies that would help make the process easier. A lot of different service providers, a lot of different insider knowledge that you need to know to be able to do it successfully. And what I mean by that is knowing which wines are good investments. I think that part, just like any investment, can be a mystery to many people. There's not a lot of content out there, especially free content out there that talks about it. Second is access to historical market data, right? Andrew, in your business, obviously looking at historical trends is extremely important. And at the time, there weren't too many reliable sources of third-party market data. And then thirdly, we're still talking about managing a physical, living, fragile product, right? So things like storage, insurance, shipping, right, which we talked about, are all, can all get very overwhelming for someone looking to just invest in wine, right? Today, when you invest in gold, you don't even think about it, but there's a lot behind the security, the authentication, right, and the storage of gold, perhaps even more so with wine, because if gold is at an 80-degree temperature, a 60-degree temperature, it's still gold. That could be life or death for a bottle of wine. So with all of these factors, and using about 6 different companies that I was liaising between, I realized that there was an opportunity to create an easier way to do this. And that's what Vinovest is, right? We use a website that has all of these services in the background and makes it so that you go to one place, you talk to one company, and you can track your portfolio, buy wines, sell wines, just like you do with any of your stocks and commodities, right? That's what I think the experience of investing in any asset, not just wine, should be.
Yeah, it's really interesting to look at it as a potential investment and comparing it against things like more traditional stocks and bonds. John, any thoughts on like an emerging market maybe that you see as the next big opportunity for wine investors?
Sure. I know that there are a lot of places in Asia where certainly wine is becoming more popular. And I think the taxes are a big impediment to some of those countries and the consumers in those areas, because there's heavy taxation on imports. But certainly in Hong Kong, I know that They've reduced the taxes on wine that's being imported, and so there the prices are about the same as what you can get here. I was also in Singapore last year, and they have a huge emerging wine scene, especially at the very high end. They have lots of wine collectors there, and they have a wine conference there annually. I think it's actually going on next week. So certainly Singapore has an extremely impressive wine scene as well. So I think Asia is definitely a big emerging market, or certainly in the case of China and Japan, they've been at it for quite a while. But I just see that continuing to be even more the case going forward.
Tanisha, how do you see shifts in consumer preferences?
Consumer preferences are now changing from, I think a lot of people, when they first started drinking wine, they may have started drinking things that were a little on the sweeter side. And so the preferences are now changing to, there are so many different styles of grapes and styles of wine. So why just stick with the few that are on the sweeter side, and let's move into something else. Also, people now, I think maybe as a result of COVID and people thinking life is short, let's, live better, they want to drink better. So instead of just grabbing this $10 bottle off the shelf, they step it up a bit and they're like, oh, well, maybe this $20 bottle, this $25 bottle. They are drinking better and looking into what are the top producers and what are some of the best regions to get wine from. So that is definitely a change that I've noticed.
Cha, as a business owner and as a curator, how do you adapt to fast changing trends in wine consumption?
I think Gen Z runs my life now, so I'm trying my best to, let's say, keep up with the Joneses, as they say. So the trends is, I think it's important for us to learn a language. I think none of us are in Gen Z on this panel. So dealing with consumers, I actually had a current, well, she just graduated this past weekend. One of the employees at the shop is a Gen Z drinker. And so I think it was super important, especially with me teaching adjunct at Syracuse University. I feel like I was tapped into this world that the rest of us didn't know. Just having the way the students would respond to the wines, I think is something that I'm like, okay, I have to understand this language and kind of their preferences from a new way. So I feel like they're developing the trends. I don't know if it's on TikTok or wherever, but they're definitely the ones developing the trends. And then we either can chase behind it or understand it. And so just like the video had mentioned about the non-alcoholic options, I want to be able to make sure that even at our events, whether for whatever preference, health, etc., life choice, if someone's choosing, I make sure we always have an NA wine available for events. I have the attorney Somm on, so I'm not going to tell you much about. We could go down a rabbit hole on if non-alcoholic wines are legal to sell or not. That's a whole nother segment. But there is a lot of conversation now on how we at least. I would rather you have NA wine next to my wine at an event versus us pouring iced tea, for example. So for me, I think it still allows me to still have the conversation about wine, right? I sell wine, or even NA tequila, et cetera, because I sell tequila. So I think that's why I'm not fighting it as a retailer, as long as I'm able to allow you to, I don't want you to convert you into drinking something else. I'm able to still talk about that NA Sauvignon Blanc in New Zealand, et cetera. So I'm appreciative of it as a category. And yeah, I think Gen Z is creating the trends, and I'm trying to keep up with them in this case, but also give them a little bit of education about tradition and understanding whether it's the, VDP or the predicate system for Germany. And, I think they're all kind of like anti-law. They don't want any laws. They don't want to hear about it. They want to just drink what's fun and fizzy, etc. But I think there is a reason to at least be able to incorporate what's fun and kind of tradition at the same time. So I think we all have the hard job for the generation after us to kind of connect the two in regards to the trends that's happening right now.
John, did you have anything to add to that?
Not too much. I tend to focus more on collectible wines and more traditional wines. So not so much on some of the newer emerging trends, but more of the classics and the wines that have been around for a little bit longer. So I definitely want to try it at some point. I just haven't had that opportunity yet.
John, you serving any Gen Zs lately?
Not too many, no.
Okay.
So I think most of my events, whether they're wine events or my own wine travels, I tend to be probably around a little bit of an older demographic, but
Okay.
it's definitely something I like trying. I like trying some of the newer wines coming out. I just haven't tried the non-alcoholic wines yet.
Cha, I heard fizzy. Any other trends that you can share with us? And I'm kind of curious, are the trends faster changing or is it just different?
Some of them are like what's old is new. Like Paquette is not new, for example. And if you don't know what Paquette is, it is the leftover skins after being pressed out to make wine. It's almost like upcycling, if you want. So this goes back to sustainability. So the skins that's left over after already making the wine, they add water to it in order to now make almost like a diluted wine, so a low alcohol wine. So you'll hear some, and which is for me refreshing, right? It's hot. You want wine, but you don't need it to be 11+%. So you can get something that's around 5 or 6%, and it still tastes like Pinot Noir, right? So I think there's something about just there's a crowd for, in this case, whether it's no or low ABV wines. And so just keeping on trend on what the kids are saying and understanding what, like, for what reason, right? Whether it's health, because they're more involved with sports, or are they doing whatever it is they're doing with it. At this point, we want to be a part of the conversation as a shop that especially is so close to a university, and understanding that's our demographic, on top of also the dean of the university too, who can afford a Barolo. So we have to be able to actually talk to both at the same time. So I think even your question you asked earlier, like what are some underrepresented regions? I think that, me spending the time and understanding Germany and some older vintages that you can have access to at a reasonable price point. I think that's a sleeper country for a lot of folks. If you're looking to actually get started into wine collecting, I can afford my birth year. Let's just put it like that, with some nice Rieslings, compared to if I was collecting Bordeaux, where, I have to take out an investment alone just to get the one bottle. I have to work with Vinovest basically in order to get my birth year. So I think that kind of gives you an idea, in this case, if you want to become a collector and you do want to celebrate, 10 years later, your anniversary, 20 years later, and actually collect all of those back vintages, you can go purchase that today in certain regions in Germany. And I think that makes it an easy, accessible point for new wine collectors. And same thing for Portugal. One of my oldest wines that I've ever tasted was a 1886 or 56 Madeira, because they held up and people can give you a little spoonful at a time. So it was an open bottle that someone was rationing out for us to taste. So I think that Madeira, you can still get a great price. And I actually lived in Portugal before I opened the shop. So during the pandemic, that's where, kind of a lot of my knowledge base comes from. And I love talking about how fortified wines plays a role in that too, whether it's port, Madeira, or even Moscatel do Setúbal. So when we're talking about the older demographics who still cherish the sipping and savoring of fortified wines, I think Portugal is also another country where it's more accessible price point for you to start a collection too.
Yes, you're speaking to the bargain hunter in me. Thank you for your insights. Let's move to segment 4.
In the wine industry, strategic investment models include direct vineyard ownership, wine investment funds, and futures trading. Each model offers distinct advantages depending on the investor's financial capacity, risk tolerance, and level of expertise. Direct vineyard ownership provides complete control and the potential for substantial returns, but requires significant upfront capital and a deep understanding of viticulture. This option is most suited for those who can handle the complexities of vineyard management and market dynamics. Wine investment funds, in contrast, offer investors the chance to participate in the wine market through professionally managed portfolios. This model is less hands-on and leverages expert knowledge to potentially mitigate risks associated with direct ownership. Investing in wine futures involves purchasing wine before it is bottled capitalizing on potential market appreciation. While it offers early access at possibly lower prices, it also carries risks like market variability and the quality of the vintage.
I just want to go around really quickly with the panelists. Do you consider wine an asset for investment? John?
I think it certainly can be. A lot of people that I know tend to purchase wine, but then some of the wine that they bought maybe 10, 15 years ago ran up in price a lot more than they expected. And so they may turn into kind of an accidental investor, and they may take some profits in some of it because it's to the point where they don't feel comfortable drinking the bottles anymore and they'd rather have the money from it. So I think you can either do it intentionally or you can end up getting there just by buying things that you like and then just having things go well for you. But I definitely think it's something that a lot of the people that I know and taste wine with are aware of, for sure.
Tanisha, should we consider wine an asset class?
Absolutely. I think it's an asset class, just like some people who collect stamps or people who collect coins or sculptures or things like that. Wine is an asset class like that. The only thing about wine, though, is it is a one and done kind of thing. Once you open the bottle and you drink it, well, that's the end of your investment. It's not something that you can necessarily just enjoy by just having it. It's something you need to actually experience in order to enjoy it.
Cha, what do you think?
I listened to your interview with the NFT club, and let's just say I'm bought in. So I guess the idea of actually having wine as investment, and then on top of that, having my bottle, even when I finish it, to possibly profit off of, I think it sounds like an amazing opportunity to actually have as an asset post enjoying it. I don't know how we create the value further. So I'm definitely interested on what the future may hold for just saying that I own this bottle and the original, I guess, art in this case. But I do see it as a possibility, whether it's, you held on to a bottle by mistake and didn't do it intentionally, or for the potential collector who is responsibly storing it correctly and also making sure that they are tracking. I think that is about, what are you storing? My mom has old wine that I tell her is vinegar all the time. So she's definitely also an accidental collector, but is the wine that she have worth anything? I don't think so. So I think there is the knowledge gap between folks who are, let's just say, collecting, but not actually knowing how to store or collect, or the best way to do it. And then if they bought wines with that intention, is it wine that will ever have value 10 to 15 years, away from when they originally purchased? So they have to do the work, or I guess hire us to do the work for them.
Anthony, as CEO of Vinovest, I'm assuming it's a resounding yes is your answer. And I do want to ask you, can you shed some light on how Vinovest puts together a portfolio? Because I kind of view Vinovest almost like a robo-advisor for wines. You can personalize a portfolio to match a user's investment goals. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Because when I started investing, I used investing in general in the stock market. I used the robo-advisor when I was in college. I didn't know much about the stock market. I knew I wanted to have a diversified portfolio. I knew how much I wanted to invest in for how long, but I knew nothing outside of that, right? And that company, what it did for me was build a portfolio, also helped educate me on what they bought for me, what they're holding for me, and also actively managed that portfolio, buying and selling stocks and bonds, helping me rebalance according to the market conditions as they fluctuated. And I had a really good experience with that company. And when I sought out to create Vinovest, I wanted to recreate that same experience of ease and simplicity, right? You don't need to be a wine expert to be able to invest in the wine market. But what you do need to know is where it fits in your overall investment portfolio, right? No one's putting 100% of their net worth into wine, or at least I hope not. Is it 5% of your portfolio? Is it 10%, right? Once you know that, then we can help you, right? And how our robo-advisor works is that it's a combination of our investment council, which is comprised of anywhere from ex Wall Street quantitative analysts to master sommeliers, masters of wine, right, and master distillers on the whiskey side. So we use both numbers and human brains to be able to construct our algorithm, and based on each person's personal preference, based on the market, and based on where they are in their investing journey, we help them purchase wines. So we buy them, we authenticate them, we store them, we insure them, make sure those wines are aging gracefully and beautifully and along the timeline. And also, I think perhaps most importantly, we educate our customers. Right? We want our users to still feel a connection with the wine. So for example, even next week, we're doing a live event with Chateau Aubryon. It's a first growth Bordeaux, one of the most incredible wineries in the world. And we invited every single Vinovest investor that holds a bottle of Chateau Aubryon in their portfolio, no matter what vintage. And it was an opportunity for these customers or prospective customers to be able to listen to someone who is a director at the company, right? Same way that a stock investor would listen to an earnings call, right, a quarterly report, and really get to know, all right, other than these price fluctuations and these critic scores, what makes this winery special? What makes this bottle of wine special? And really deepen that connection. And I think that leads to more educated, more informed, and ultimately more confident investors. And that's our goal at Vinovest, right? We want you to have good returns, but we also want you to feel good about those returns and know where they came from.
John, I want to ask you, because last year I saw that you published a YouTube video entitled 10 $50 Bordeaux wines I'm buying now. Can you reflect on what worked and or what hasn't worked?
Sure. I think another video that I do is annually on the on the Bordeaux futures. So for example, last week I just released a video on 2023 Bordeaux, for example, and that's the current futures offering right now. And last year I did one on 2022. But I also do videos with wines at various price points, because what I found is that people who do intentionally buy wine for their collection, many of the wines, they'll continue to gain complexity and improve with some additional bottle aging. Oftentimes with Bordeaux, it's at least 10 years or so. In some instances, a little bit longer. Like for Chateau Aubryon, it would take longer than 10 years for it to reach its peak. And so in the meantime, you could have people who spend a lot of money and have a lot of wine, but they may not have anything to drink, because everything that they have, or a large percentage of what they have, has to be stored and aged further to get the maximum benefit out of those wines. And so I came up with this, what I call cellar defenders, which should be wines at lower price points that are ready to enjoy at a younger age. So people can go in and have those on hand to drink, rather than risking pulling one of the bottles that they should be aging, because it would be much better if they can exercise some restraint and let that wine reach its peak. So some examples of that would be like Rioja, which is aged for an extended period of time at the winery for Grand Reservists, for example. Those are pretty much ready to go on release, even though they will continue to get better. And there's other examples of that as well. But then also with Bordeaux, most of the producers will make not only their top wine, which is the most age-worthy wine, but they'll make a second, and in some instances, a third wine as well. And those wines are made in a more approachable style, and so that those wines are ready to be enjoyed at a younger age. And then you can drink those wines without having to worry about dipping into your stash of your more collectible and your more prized wines that need more age on them before you enjoy them.
I like that approach. Anybody else want to chime in before we move on to the next segment? I'm getting so carried away with all of you, enjoying hearing you talk about wine. Okay, let's bring it home and go to segment 5.
Mastering wine as an investment asset demands a deep understanding of market dynamics and careful strategic planning. Investors need to assess key financial and logistical factors, such as the methods of acquisition, options for securing storage, and optimal timing for transactions to maximize returns. Effective risk management, including diversification across different vintages and regions, and ensuring adequate insurance coverage is critical for safeguarding these assets. Integrating wine into a diversified portfolio requires detailed analysis of each wine's potential for value increase, driven by market trends, historical data, and scarcity. Financial benchmarks, such as the LiveX Fine Wine 100 Index, are essential tools for investors, providing a snapshot of the market and guiding investment decisions. This index helps in identifying top-performing wines and predicting future market movements, enabling investors to make well-informed choices that balance potential risks with expected returns.
Anthony, you mentioned how I, as a financial advisor, am familiar with looking at market trends and historical data to predict future movements in stocks or bonds. How do you measure the performance of wine investments in comparison to more traditional assets?
Yeah, well, Andrew, you mentioned, or the video mentioned, LiveX Fine Wine 100, which is a useful benchmark. It functions similarly as the S&P 500, where from a methodology standpoint, they take the top 100 vineyards in the world, and then what they do is they measure the average performance of their last 10 release vintages over time, creating a broader index, so to say, of the fine wine market. Now, this is not a tradable index. So unless you bought 1,000 wines, 1,000 bottles of wine, it'd be pretty hard to recreate the performance of that index, but it does give a useful indication of where the wine market is headed. Perhaps more useful is the sub-indices that LiveX produces. So they have what's called the Burgundy 50, the Bordeaux 50, right? The California 50, right? So those give you insights into regional trends. And that's where at Vinovest, we have benchmarks for performance on looking to beat out these regional benchmarks that LiveX publishes every single year. So when we're looking at performance, they're certainly one of the market leaders in terms of data sophistication. There's a few other sites out there, Wine Searcher, Wine Decider. A lot of the major auction houses have publicly available auction sales data as well. And at Vinovest, we use an aggregate of all of it, as well as consumption data to be able to make our decisions.
Tanisha, in what ways do you think wine investments are misunderstood by the general public?
I think they're misunderstood because people still think of wine as a tangible good, because it is a bottle of wine. You can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. They don't think about it the same way that they would think about a stock or a bond, which, is technically just some words on the paper or something on the ticker tape or something like that. But if you are investing in wine, while it is a thing that you can hold in your hands, it's not yours. Technically, it is an investment. So it's not something that you will get to enjoy or look at or anything like that. And also, I think it goes back to something that John mentioned. You have to exercise some restraint. You can't pick this bottle up and drink it. This isn't something that's going to be in your cellar necessarily for you to look at and say, oh, one day this is going to make me a lot of money. No, we can't think about it like that.
Cha, what advice would you give to somebody looking to diversify their investment portfolio with wine?
Yes, I think that a lot of ways that I talk about having, a foot in the investment is not really in the bottles. It really comes to just having accessibility through equity. I did the same by investing in a up and coming community. I would say in downtown Syracuse with my store. So there's other ways to talk about investing in wine, and it may not be by purchasing or, with like one bottle or a particular region. It may be by actually, let's say, buying a vineyard or starting your own wine label, or in my case, opening a shop. So I think this part of investing in wine, I think people forget to talk about as well, but you are investing in the industry every time you add another category, or if you, in this case, open a brick and mortar and you're doing more than just investing in wine, you're also helping people develop a part of that community as well when we're having the conversations. I'm in a market that did not have a boutique wine shop in the area, and being able to have the conversations that me and my staff have every day is with our consumers. It allows them to, like I said, choose anything from Moscato or Barolo, and I think that is making more folks interested in wine, will now get people to even take the trips to, whether they're starting in the Finger Lakes and one day making that trip to Barolo in the future. So we're actually helping and cultivating more wine lovers in the future. So I do think that that's one way to have an investment in wine that's beyond the bottle. And I hope that some of the brands that I represent, since they are so small, I don't know if, when it comes to Black-owned winemakers, women-owned winemakers, some of the Native American winemakers we have here, they may not be ever on the, being compared to S&P 500, et cetera, but can age really well. They're buying grapes probably from a farmer in Napa Valley that may be right on the other side of the road from some of the Opus Ones, et cetera, that's out there. So I think that sometimes the brand recognition, I think understanding back to doing the history of the terroir, knowing the history of the terroir of each bottle and seeing how you want to be a part of it, I think is definitely important too. I think in Chile as well as in Napa, there is this co-op idea of buying parcels of a larger vineyard where you can be able to start your own label, and then also working with local cooperatives as well, so we can have more voices, diverse voices, have an equity stake in the wine industry at large.
That's great. We hope to see more diversity. And I love seeing a small business, because small business owners are always so involved in their communities. John, you talked a little bit about having a strategy of like having wines that age a little quicker so that you can drink sooner. Can you discuss the importance of diversification in a wine investment portfolio? Because it requires going beyond simply buying what you enjoy drinking.
I think that's right. And to some extent, it depends on people's goals. And so I always tell people that it's good to decide if you're buying wine for investment or for collecting and personal enjoyment, or kind of a hybrid between the two. And a lot of people will do the hybrid, but in that situation, or if you're just buying primarily for collecting purposes with an eye towards enjoyment, what I typically recommend is to diversify your portfolio, and I would say make your asset allocation somewhat comparable to what you like to enjoy. And so if you find that you drink Bordeaux 1/4 of the time and Burgundy 1/4 of the time, then 25% of your portfolio should be Bordeaux, 25% should be Burgundy. And you don't have to be quite rigid with those numbers, but when I first started, for example, one of the mistakes that I made is I bought 100% California wines, and then I did that for 3 or 4 years. And then I started discovering wine from other regions as well. And I realized that I really liked wine from all over the place. And just because of those initial purchases, my portfolio or my collection is still not quite in line with my drinking preferences. And so to the extent people can get in front of that and take that into account at the beginning, I think they'll definitely be better off for it.
Do we want to just go around with a quick final thought and or favorite wine right now? Anthony?
Yeah, apologies for having to hop off a little bit. Favorite wine, that's a dangerous question. I think I went to a Burgundy event a couple months ago in LA called La Palais, and it was, attended the auction there. And I think one of my favorite things about the wine community is everybody's generosity. Everyone's bringing some of their best bottles to share, just like John had mentioned. And I had a bottle of Domaine Leroy Le Beaumont 2009. And it was one of the best wines I've ever had. And I still think about it from time to time.
Thank you. Tanisha?
Okay, so I'll go with my favorite wine right now to stay out of trouble. Right now, I have to say champagne. because I don't think people drink champagne enough. I think they just wait for a special occasion, and that shouldn't be the case. It is Wednesday, you made it, drink some champagne tonight. But I like the diversity that you can get in champagne. Champagnes don't all taste the same, from a Blanc de Blanc to a Blanc de Noir, from a Brut to a Demi-Sec, from region in Chouy to, further down in the Côte de Blanc or the Marne Valley. You have so much diversity in flavor and terroir there for it to just be this one thing using kind of the same grapes. So I'll say champagne right now.
Love it. Cha?
To stick on my Germany high, I'm gonna say for right now, I definitely had the Becker Chardonnay. It's underneath the mineral label that he has, and I think that German Chardonnay is gonna, move over Burgundy. You heard it here first, and I'm ready to fight Anthony, John, if you want. I'm ready to go toe to toe on any wine list with some of these German Chardonnays I tried, and mainly because of the price point. I think I'm all about accessibility and bringing more people to the table, and we can't be drinking Burgundies like we were, And I feel like there's something to say about how Becker Chardonnay, just was singing when I was there. So that's what I'm drinking right now.
And last but not least, John.
Yeah, this is really hard because there's pretty much every category that I like. That's just a question of finding a soulful and quality producer from every region. But I've learned that everyone all around the world has one region or at least one or two producers in it that are making extremely high quality, soulful wines. But something that I've been enjoying a lot lately has been Nebbiolo, both from Barolo and Barbaresco. And so I was there in November and had that with some truffles and some pasta in the local cuisine. And it also ages very well. And with some of the expense on the Burgundies that have run up dramatically, probably since I started collecting in 2008 or so, a lot of collectors have shifted a little bit and started also collecting, especially Barolo. And the Nebbiolos also tend to show a sense of place, much like Pinot Noir does from Burgundy. So I think that's a good category as well.
Well, thank you to all the panelists this evening. Thank you to the Inspired Moneymakers for tuning in. We covered a lot. We got inside baseball in the world of wine. We learned about terroir and how that impacts valuation of wine, the flavor of wine. But I love that it comes down to the basics. You can talk about the science and the complexity, but ultimately just follow your palate. See what you enjoy drinking and tasting. And I enjoyed sustainability and learning about diversification and how a lot of these traditional investing ideas can apply to a wine collection. So I encourage everyone to follow and learn more from all the panelists this evening. Anthony Zhang, you can find him at vinovest.co. John Jackson, the attorney Somm, he's on Instagram, YouTube, and other places. Look for attorney Somm and you will find him. Tanisha Townsend is at girlmeetsglass.com and Cha McCoy is at chamccoy.com. Thank you to the panelists for this really inspired discussion about wine. I encourage everybody to join us next week. We'll be back on Wednesday, May 22nd. We're going to be talking about building wealth with real estate. Say that 20 times fast. Strategies for success. Until next time, do something that scares you because that's where the magic happens. And enjoy a glass of wine. Thanks, everybody.